Alright, and welcome back to video 2 of 3 for chapter 2, working with functions and formulas in Microsoft Excel. In this particular video, we're going to look at some functions and look at the various types of functions that Microsoft Excel offers within the program itself. So before we actually look into the functions, I want to go ahead and give you the definition of a function. An Excel function is a predefined computation that simplifies creating a formula to perform a complex calculation. So essentially what a function does is it just creates the syntax and the format for applying a function to a series of inputs to give you an output. So Excel has a series of categories that they kind of group their functions in. We'll go over those really quickly. The first one is date and time. Those are functions used for manipulating dates, times, and as well as a combination of date and time put together. The second functional group is financial. Those type of functions perform financial calculations such as payments, rates, present value, and future value computations. Excel also has a logical set of functions. Those essentially just perform logical tests and return value based on the criteria of those tests. Logical functions include operators for combined tests such as and, or, and not. Lookup and reference, those are functions that basically reference, either lookup or reference a value within a spreadsheet or the current spreadsheet, a separate spreadsheet, or even a completely different open workbook. It creates links to those cells or provides reference to cells in a worksheet. So those type of functions can actually look up values currently resident in your worksheet and determine how to make display data based off of the reference values. Math and trig functions, again, those are just standard functions that perform your everyday math and trigonometric calculations. And then we have the last group is statistical. Those perform common statistical calculations such as averages and standard deviations. So now that we've defined what a function is and gone over some of the groups, the next step would be, again, to learn how to use functions within Excel. So in working with Excel to actually create a function, what you would do is select the cell that you want to create the function in, and start by inserting the function call by entering in the equal sign, and then followed by the function name. As we discussed in one of the previous videos, we discussed the autocomplete feature. Excel also has that feature available to use with formulas, so you can actually, once you type in the equal sign, the formula autocomplete will then go ahead and activate. That feature will activate, and it will display a list of available functions based on what you type in after the equal sign. So if you wanted to type in equal and then the letter SU, you would see all available functions that start with those letters. In addition to the autocomplete, there is the function screen tip. This is a pop-up that details what the expected format of the particular function you're using, what those arguments are. And we'll go ahead and show a demonstration of that once we get to the Excel worksheet. In addition to just entering in the equal sign, you can also use the insert function dialog box. Again, this provides the capability to search for a function, select the function category, and then also drill down into selecting the function from the available list provided there. So going over some of the standard functions, we'll just cover briefly some of the math and statistical functions in this particular section. So the sum function, again, totals or aggregates one or more cells and displays the result in the cell containing the function. So what I've listed here in the presentation is just how you would indicate aggregating two or more cells within a function to get the total of those. Second is the average and median functionality. And again, these are used to calculate central tendency based on the range or the inputted values. The average, again, calculates the arithmetic mean or the average of the cell range values. So if you had values in cell A1 through A10, you could compute the average of those values by using the function that you see here. The median calculates the midpoint value or the value 1/2 of the data set above or below the data. So again, if you had a series of data that was appearing in cell A1 through A10, you can use the median function to find the midpoint value of those. And again, the median is useful in illustrating how extreme values impact the arithmetic mean of the average. And we will see an example of that on our Excel spreadsheet that we're working with. One thing to note with regard to the average and the median functions is that if there are some empty cells or cells containing anything other than numeric values, it will go ahead and ignore those empty cells. Some additional math and statistical functions that we'll look at here. The min function. This analyzes the argument or the list of values and determines of the included values which one is the lowest. By comparison, or by contrast, the max function analyzes the argument list and determines the highest value. So again, you can see how those are structured. And again, in creating those function calls, you can list each of those fields separately. And that's advantageous if you're averaging or if you're looking at values that are in non-adjacent cells or ranges. But you can also go ahead and identify the values within the function by the range themselves. And we'll see that again in the demonstration here. Some additional mathematic functions, the count functions. Again, these count the cells in a range that meet the defined criteria by the function and the enclosed data within the parentheses. So the count function tallies the number of cells in the range that contain values used in calculations. And these are numerical and date data. So again, you have an example here of how to use the count function. The count blank, very similar, however, it aggregates and totals the number of cells in a range that are blank. And then you have the count A, which tallies the number of cells in the range or the specified data that you provide that contain data that are not that contain data and are not blank. So again, those are some of the main functions we'll be looking at here. In addition to the functions, I just want to kind of cover a couple of quick tips and tools when using math functions. So the quick analysis is basically a tool within Microsoft Excel. It's a set of analytical tools that becomes available for formatting, chart and table creation, and then basic function insertion. In order to use this, again, select the range of data, and the quick analysis tool appears at the bottom right corner of the selected range, and then you can select the analytical tool that meets your needs. A couple of tips when creating functions. If you're doing a simple standard computation where you're actually either just multiplying or dividing two cells, go ahead and use the actual arithmetic expression for that, and don't use the function. Again, that's just for quick, very simple. And I've provided an example here where if you're dividing cell B6 by G6, that's a simple computation. Go ahead and use that format as opposed to the quotient function here that actually does the same thing. However, it's less work, things of that nature. When you go ahead and go to create the function, you'll see potentially some brackets in there in terms of the format. Those will indicate optional arguments, and again, those are not specifically part of the syntax for entering in the arguments. Another tip, what you can do in Excel is you can nest functions as arguments. So you can do multiple computations or multiple function calls within a particular cell to, again, format the data and basically reduce the number of steps that you do computations on. So for example, if you wanted to take the average of a range and then round that to 2 decimal places, I've provided the example here on how to round that. And again, this just gives you an average of the range, and then it rounds the value to 2 decimal places, as opposed to using a cell to do the average, and then using another cell to go ahead and round that value to 2 decimal places based on what you get in the initial computation where you found the average of the range. Non-adjacent ranges can be used in aggregation and aggregate functions. Those would be sum, min, max, average. You can separate non-adjacent ranges with a comma in the argument list. So for example, if you were trying to find the maximum value in 2 separate ranges, you have data in A2 through A14 as well as C2 and C14. This function will check all those values in both of those ranges and provide the maximum value. In looking, one of the other features within Excel is the status bar statistics. When you select a range, look down at your status bar and you'll see that based on the selected values, Excel automatically computes the average, sum, and the count and provides that down in the status bar. We'll go ahead and see that here in just a minute. And one other tip, when you're using when you're dealing with decimals, it's recommended to use the round function as opposed to decreasing or concatenating the decimal points. By rounding, you increase the accuracy and precision of your values. In addition to the math functions, we're going to look at a couple of date functions in this particular section. There's 2 that we're going to look at. One is the today function that displays the current date in a cell. Again, note that there are no arguments required in this particular function call, as well as the now function. This uses the computer's clock to display the current date and time in military format of the last time the workbook was opened. And again, very similar to the today function, no arguments are required within it. One thing to note when using these 2 functions, both the today and the now functions do not continuously update date and time while the workbook is open. It only reports the date and time the workbook was last opened. So, in looking at our worksheet here, I have a series of scores, and I have values from A3 to A17. Over here I have some examples of computations. So in this first one, I have a formula up here in the formula bar that aggregates the sum, the average, the median, low score, high score, number of numeric cells, number of empty cells, number of non-empty cells. Notice I have a value incomplete, and then a rounded average score. And as I mentioned before, when you select a particular range, if you look down here in the bottom of your status bar, you see average, the computed average, the count of the number of values that you have, and then the sum. So there's an example of some computations with mathematical functions. As I mentioned, the date and time functions. Again, you have using the today function, it shows today's date, which is 8/31/2016. And if you look at the now function, that reports a time of 8/31/2016. It's 1952 hours or 7:52 p.m. The current time on my system is 8:31, so this particular workbook has been open for roughly 35 minutes. And that's a brief rundown and example of how to use various math functions and date functions. Again, we'll continue with video 3 in this set to round out the formulas and functions, chapter 2 of Microsoft Excel.